welcome. Today we're going to be talking with Lisa Arnold, who's a candidate for the Democratic primary for the Massachusetts State Representative for the 17th Middlesex District. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so looking forward to getting to know you and your stance on some of the issues.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit, first of all, about your background. Where did you grow up and what was your career?
So I was born in Nebraska, and after about 10 years my family moved to Utah. So I lived in Utah for a while, and in Utah I was experienced a bit of discrimination myself because I'm a Methodist, grew up Methodist, and and Utah is full of Mormons, and I learned very quickly that I was an outsider. So I kind of had that experience, and so my desire was to get out of Utah as soon as I could. So on the day that I graduated from college, I got in my car and I drove east to Massachusetts. I had traveled throughout high school, and I knew that I was looking for where I wanted to live. So, and I really, when I came to Massachusetts, I really loved the history and the people that I met here, and I just felt like it was a place that I could belong. I felt like I felt comfortable when I was here, so I wanted to move here. So I came across country with a job. I had managed to get a job, but I had nowhere to live. So my first month, I had to scramble to figure it out. I actually worked I had a degree in psychology, and I worked in a group home for emotionally disturbed adolescents. And I was fortunate enough that they let me live in the attic of the group home. So with the caveat, so it was sort of an agreement that if they needed me, so I was kind of on call. So for the month that it took me to find a place to live, I was living in the attic. So that was interesting, and I was just starting out, did not have, I learned really then how to be independent, but I also know as a psychologist, as a person doing counseling, you don't make a lot of money. So I really understand what it's like to struggle to make ends meet, to figure out, I can put gas in my car so I can get to my job, or I can buy food. And so I really understand people who have to go through those kinds of decisions and how difficult it is to really make ends meet on hardly any salary.
Yeah. So after you were working in a group home, you got into high tech somehow.
I did, yeah. Group home psychology is about solving problems for individuals. And then I was listening to a radio ad, and I heard about technical support, where you solve problems on a technical issue. And one of the things I'd been doing in the group home was, the computer was broken, so I go fix that, or the TV wasn't working, so I was like, oh, I can troubleshoot, I can do this. And so I ended up working first at Lotus doing technical support, and every single phone call that you took was sort of like a mini problem that you were solving. And then I moved from there to Cisco Systems, where I've been for the last 25 years.
Wow, 25 years.
Yeah. So.
Great. And what motivated you to run for this seat right now?
Well, I knew that I was going to be being laid off from Cisco. I'd gotten fair warning. So back in September, when I first heard that I figured it was going to happen because I'm in Massachusetts and the entire company is in California, so I knew it was going to happen someday anyway. And I wanted to take my experience and use it to make a difference in the world. Kind of go back to my roots when I first started, and I wanted to make a difference for people. And so I wanted to be able to make a difference. And I was trying to think of the best way to do that. And I realized that running for state representative, being a state representative, was a way that I could take all of the issues that I care about, because I care about so many, and it's really hard to pick one and really make a difference. If you're spread too thin, you can't really make a dent in any of the issues. So I felt like this was a way that I could be the voice in front of all of the groups, all of the people working on the issues that I care about. So I felt like it was a good opportunity. The time is here, and I'm ready to make a career move. So.
Great. So you don't have any experience in government, really?
I don't. But I have a lot of experience in working with people, doing negotiating, figuring out who the players are. That's my job at Cisco, was chief of staff, and it was my job to get all the people in the room together, all of the executive as well as the people on his team, and to get them all on the same page so that we could move forward and make major transformations and changes. And my boss was known for going into the trouble spots and fixing big problems, whether it was a quality issue or a morale issue. He was known for being able to do that, and I was part of the team that would go in and do that. So I feel like those kinds of skills and that kind of experience is the kind of skills that you need in government, because you're going to have to work with a lot of people who don't always agree. They may agree on the bigger picture, but when it comes to the details, getting people to feel like they're all on the same page, and that's something that I specialize in.
Well, we should jump right into some of the issues facing Massachusetts. There are so many right now. What are the issues you care about most?
So the primary motivator for why I feel like I want to get involved is mental health. I lost both of my sisters to mental illness at different times. My younger sister was suffered from bipolar from the time she was about 13. My older sister didn't actually have any mental illness history at all until she reached her 40s. And both of them, I saw the experiences that they dealt with, and how, as a family member and our families, how we had to sit on the sidelines and watch, and couldn't always help them get the services they needed, partially because of the HIPAA requirements, the privacy requirements, but just them being able to advocate for themselves. We'd have to step in and advocate, because they wouldn't always have the strength going through what they were going to get the services that they needed, to ask for the help that they needed. And then the services weren't always there. Sometimes, if they'd had a mental health crisis, you go in, if you can say in the doctor's office that you're not suicidal anymore, you're not going to hurt yourself, they send you home. And so it's not until you actually hurt yourself that you can get the care that you need. And I think that we need better mental health services, mental health access, to help people who are suffering to get the treatment that they need before it gets too late, before they've gone over that edge. And if people are crying out for help, we need to be able to help them. So that's really my motivation behind my number one passion for what I'd like to see changed.
Okay, so more services for mental health.
Yeah.
Statewide. And where do you stand on all of the police issues that are going on? I know there's different bills in the House and the Senate talking about defunding or just moving funds around for policing. What's your opinion on that?
It's definitely a controversial issue, and definitely not something that we've been talking about in the past, so I'm glad that the conversation has come up. I personally love data. I think decisions should be made based on data. So I think before any decision is made, we need to look at what's the data telling us about where's the funding going, what kinds of issues are the police force dealing with, what kinds of issues are we dealing with in the community itself, and really draft legislation that's based on understanding the data. And every city's different, the state itself is different, so we need to look at how our healthcare providers, our emergency responders, how are they spending their time? How are the police officers spending their time? It seems like more and more we're giving services, we're giving the responsibility for responding to calls to the police officers who may not be trained, who may not be the ones that are especially trained to handle, say, a mental health crisis. Or if somebody's going through a mental health issue, if they're dealing with a traumatic situation, having someone come onto the scene who may be seen as a threat to them may just escalate the situation and not help.
So you're for possibly reallocating some funding to other groups that have more training in mental health?
Yes, I think taking a look at where the money is best spent, where the services are most needed. If the services are most needed in helping with homelessness or with mental health trauma, then we need to make sure that the people who are the first responders, who are first on the scene have the skills to deal with that.
Yeah. And would you support a police standards and training commission, which would give civilians oversight over the police certifications and taking away certifications?
Yeah, I think we definitely need more civilian oversight of what's going on, and not just civilian oversight, but I think it needs to be people who really understand what the issues are, people who've experienced it, experienced trauma, maybe even people who are have come out of the criminal justice system and they've been in, they understand the issues better because they've lived it. Not necessarily it really needs to be a diverse coalition of people who are making those decisions and doing that oversight. But I think the ability to decertify is something that we need to have because there are people lose their jobs all the time because they do the wrong thing, and we need to make sure that that's true in every
Okay. Yeah. Okay. How would you rate Governor Baker's response to COVID over these many months?
All the deep ones in there, aren't you? I think we got started too late. I think if we had shut down about 2 weeks earlier, we'd be in a lot better position than we are. I think we'd have been able to open up faster. But speaking of opening up faster, I think we opened up too fast, or we actually opened up when the R0 number is the reinfection rate is something that should be watched, but it's not one of the 5 key metrics that Baker is looking at. And we started to open up when we were in the green, which is below, the R0 was below 1. Since we've started to reopen, that R0 number has increased, and we're now at 1.05. Looked it up today, and we're continuing to open up further. And I think that because we got back into the red above 1, we should have rolled things back and not opened up as quickly. I think we're doing a great job of wearing masks. I think that we're doing a great job of, for the most part, staying social distancing. But I'm not sure it's because of the work that the Baker administration has done. I think it's because of the people themselves. The people of Massachusetts really understand the data and they understand the science, and they're the ones that are policing themselves. So I think for the most part, that's why we're doing okay. But yeah, I'm nervous that we're going to have to roll things back.
Well, unemployment is right now at 17.4% in Massachusetts. Do you see that going lower soon, or what do you expect to see in Massachusetts, and how can we help people who are unemployed?
I understand why we reopened the economy because of that, because of the unemployment. I think the right answer is to look at history. We haven't seen this level of unemployment for a long time. The Depression is probably a good example of the last time that we saw this. What did we do then? I think we can't go back in time. We can't go back to April and do it over. But I feel like if we had completely shut down, just shut down with the exception of real essential services, and done contact tracing and done testing, really good testing of everyone, so that we knew exactly where the disease was and how we could contain it, we'd have been able to reopen the economy already. Now we're not there. Now we're kind of trickling reopen, and it's going to be really hard to do all the testing that we need to do all the contact tracing that we need to do. So I think if we reopen businesses, we need to make sure that we're really diligent about wearing masks, about social distancing. They've put up the plastic shields. We don't know how that's helping. But I think that if we can do that, we're not going to go back to 100% for a long time, especially with the schools. Should
the schools reopen in the fall here in Lowell and Chelmsford?
No.
Okay.
No. I think from a building perspective, absolutely not. I think we need to figure out the right answer to that. I don't have children in the school system. I'm not the person to talk to. I'm not a teacher. I wouldn't say to ask me. I would say the right thing to do is bring the right people in the room who are directly affected by it and ask them what's going to work for them. What are the issues that are facing the teachers? What are the teachers concerned about? What the ideas do the teachers have? Brainstorming is an excellent way to find good problem solving. There's tell a quick story about a brainstorming. They were trying to figure out what to do about electric wires, and they got a whole bunch of people in a room who had different experience, and it was anywhere from the secretary to the engineer. And they came up with an idea to deal with the electric wires. They needed to get the snow off. They said, why don't we figure out a way to get a bear to climb up and shake the pole? It's a ridiculous idea, but hey, let's go with it. And then they're like, well, how are we going to get the bear to climb the pole? Well, we'll put honey on top of the pole. Well, how are you going to get the honey on top of the pole? How about we have a helicopter drop the honey? Wait, the helicopter's going to come by with the wind and going to get the snow off the wires, right? So that's what brainstorming does, is you start with a stupid idea because you've got everybody, or just a dumb idea you throw out because you've got all sorts of people just trying to come up with whatever, and eventually you come up with a solution that everybody's like, yeah, why didn't we think of that? And that's the kind of dialogue I think that we need to be having around this, is get everybody in the room who has any say, who has any experience with this at all, and can come up with the creative idea that nobody would have thought about if they were just sitting there by themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to very much consider equity among all the school children, so that some children have an easier time if their parents are more around, if they have better Wi-Fi, and it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that bothered me, I think, the most when we shut down, is how many kids don't have good internet. And as I was working with people at doing the different Zoom calls that we were doing, one of the issues that people would have is they couldn't necessarily do their job while their kids were doing their schoolwork because they had too many people on the internet and the broadband just wasn't strong enough for it. And the internet access issue isn't going to be solved by the time we go back to school. The childcare problem isn't going to be solved. For people who have to go back to work, they can't watch their children. We've already seen that. So there's a lot of things that need to be solved, a lot of issues that need to be solved, and I don't think any one person can solve them by themselves. Yeah. So we need to get the right people in the room.
Yeah, there's probably no perfect solution till this pandemic is over. I know that you're a big, avid biker.
Yes.
What is your position on state allocation of funds for mass transit, bike lanes, pedestrian safety? Is that something that you would be very active in at the State House?
I would love to see more activity in there. I know we have the Complete Streets program. There's a lot of funding in the Complete Streets program. There's also a program called Safe Routes to Schools, which allows for pathways so that children can walk or bike to schools, and there's funding there. I'd like to see us bring that funding to Chelmsford and Lowell to make the streets safer. I know we have some Complete Streets funding. I know we've just recently gotten a grant to help with some of that. And I think one of the things I'd love to see completed, and I know that they're working on this with the Conservation Trust, is the final 3 miles of the Bruce Freeman. They're doing a great job of building it south and west, and all we need is the final 3 miles to get the Bruce Freeman rail trail into Lowell, and it will bring all of those people who are riding their bikes into the city where they can spend money, and it will really help boost the economy. So that's something that I really would like to see happen.
Very good. And what about that huge highway project in Boston called I believe it's called the Throat? Do you have any thoughts on whether that should go forward with moving the highway? And
I think going back to the history thing, when we did the Conservation Corps after the Depression, putting people to work, that was a way to get people back to work, and it's going to cost. You're going to have to take we're going to have to make an investment. We're going to have to take loans. Our economy is such right now that the only way I think to really build the economy back up is to borrow and is to spend, to give people money so that they can spend it in the economy. I mean, the best way to build our economy is to get people spending again. And the only way we're going to be able to get people spending again is to provide jobs. So yeah, I think that we need to look at what types of projects, what infrastructure projects out there are the best ones to be doing. I don't know that the throat is the best one. I think that our mass transit, public transportation system is really lacking in everything right now, reliability. I would like to see more investment in that. I'd like to see us get our public transportation system up and running better, more reliably. Work on regional transit, doing the east-west rail, the north-south rail, so that we have connections. It's ridiculous if you wanted to get to Andover. Well, Andover's probably not quite the same, but if you wanted to get to, say, Fitchburg, you have to go from Lowell all the way down to Boston and then back up to Fitchburg, where if we had some kind of a connector that connected all of those ends, I think that it would make that transportation and getting to a lot of the other cities, those gateway cities, much easier if we had a way to connect those better. Yeah. So those are the kinds of infrastructure projects that I'd like to see us invest in.
Okay. And how about the division that's happening right now around racism as a public health issue? I know you spoke at City Council. What are your thoughts on whether the City Council should move forward with accepting some of the proposals in that letter?
My number one position on that is, again, we should be listening to the people who are experiencing it. We had several people in the community, several people in the Black community speak up and say, this is what's happening to us, and this is what we think needs to happen in order to solve the problem. To come up with a solution that's anything less than what they asked for is disingenuous. So yes, racism is a public health crisis. The only way we're going to be able to resolve it is if we name it, we call it what it is, and then we look at what the right resources are to help alleviate it, to help fix the problem. And I'm not sure if we don't actually declare racism as a public health crisis officially, that we can get some of the funding that we need. So I hope that since we didn't go that far, I still hope that there is something available to help.
What funding would that be?
There are many grants that you can get, and I think with Boston and Chicopee and the several other cities that have declared it as a health crisis, they are able to have access to some of those grants. And I would hope that we've got smart people here in Lowell who are really working on the problem with the health centers. That we're going to be able to find a way to still be able to access that funding, so that we can make some inroads.
And will that include some big changes to the police department, do you think?
It needs to. It needs to. I'm not the one to say what those changes need to be, but I think civilian oversight is the number one change. We need a lot more civilian oversight. The fox guarding the hen house analogy is never a good one. So we definitely need people who have the lived experience, who can really have the dialogue, the open dialogue. And I mean, the chief seems to be open to having a dialogue, but until we actually sit down and talk, we won't know what our options are. So,
is there a specific committee that you're hoping to get on if you get into the House of Representatives?
Hadn't really thought about that one.
Okay.
Definitely anything that I can do to help with criminal justice reform and mental health. I think that's where my passion is, and the other dealing with the public transportation and bicycle infrastructure. Those are my passions. So I would like to be able to have more say in those areas.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. I think we got a good sense of where you stand on many of the pressing issues of today. So thank you very much.
And thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for watching.